It was a warm, sunny afternoon on July 25th, 2002, a year after release date. Kids were playing out in the parks and promenades. Loved ones were near each other, cherishing each moment. Then suddenly, in walks my brother. At the time, he was sold this game at the age of 11, a few weeks before his 12th birthday. The game is clearly registered for 15 or over, but back then, no one gave a shit. I walked up to my other brother and said, "Look, I bought this for $10. Let's play tonight." He agreed. They booted up the game on the PlayStation 2, the world's best console to date, connected to a television with a bigger back than most bodybuilders. Walked in, a naive, curious young boy of the age of 4. All I can remember are those words.
Listen, someone's broken into my house. Call 911.
Is this the Payne residence?
Yes, someone's broken into my house. They're still here. You have to...
Good. I'm afraid I cannot help you.
Who is this? Hello?
It echoed across the room, across the village, across the town. The more I saw of this first level, the more it became clear to me I should probably stop watching. But I couldn't. I was with my two brothers. I didn't want to let them think I'm some quitter. And then it happened.
Michelle? Honey, anybody home? I didn't like the way the show started. They'd given me the best seat in the house. Front row center.
Michelle!
It's coming.
Freeze! NYPD, drop it!
Coming! Get it!
No, please, God, no. No, God, no, please, Michelle. Oh, baby.
Max Payne was released back in 2001 on the 25th of July. It was developed by Remedy Entertainment and published by Rockstar Games. It's a classic noir third-person shooter that helped put Remedy Entertainment on the map. They would later go on to develop its sequel after the success from the first game. The development began back in 1997, 4 years prior to the release date, on the engine Max FX. This was after the release of their previous game, Death Rally. Remedy Entertainment is a Finnish video game developer that were funded to develop Max Payne by Rockstar Games. After the sequel, the rights of Max Payne were then sold to Take-Two, the publisher we now know and quote-unquote love.
That's called sarcasm, dearest.
Max Payne was the game that began to make players feel that Rockstar had the potential to become more than just the creators of the Grand Theft Auto genre and to have the initiative to try and create a different type of game with the same formula their fans are used to which they have Remedy Entertainment to thank for that credibility, due to the success of Max Payne, which I believe gave Rockstar Games and Rockstar North the confidence and mindset to believe that if Max Payne is as successful as it is, then perhaps other games Rockstar create can be. Judging by the IMDb score as well as the Metacritic, it's safe to say this game is beloved by fans and critics. I believe Rockstar have Remedy Entertainment to thank because nearer the time of Max Payne's release, Rockstar had tried their first attempts to branch out away from Grand Theft Auto, in which the games they had developed themselves at the time were not the most memorable. Here are some examples.
You want to explain yourself? What are you doing?
Making a mistake.
Making a mistake. What is going on in your mind?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, baby. Yeah. How about new?
Around the same time of these releases, people were more likely to have heard of Grand Theft Auto 1, 2 and Grand Theft Auto London, as they were more popular back then, and more importantly, people now will remember those entries as they are part of something much bigger, as Grand Theft Auto 5 is a AAA game with a total of 170 million copies sold as of August 2022. But in order to become bigger and stronger, you need a consistent source of calcium and protein, which are nutrients that can be found in dairy products such as milk. However, there can only be so much milk you can get before you need another fucking sequel. Grand Theft Auto 3 was going to be released 3 months after Max Payne, so Rockstar were pretty busy crunching away developing on that game, to which did significantly well, and pissed off a lot of parents and created a lot of coverage and outrage from news outlets.
This is Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
There is nothing new about worrying over the impact of media on children. One generation of adults after another has viewed with alarm and risen with righteous indignation over the potential damaging effects of violent comic books, rock and roll music, graphic movies, obscene lyrics, not to mention the wholesale impact of the internet and all that's contained within. Grand Theft Auto 3, one of the most popular, technically sophisticated, and graphic video games ever designed, may have given our generation of adults something new to worry about. Since it was released 9 months ago, Grand Theft Auto 3 has sold 3.5 million copies at $50 per. It carries a rating of M for motherfucker, but that, of course, has only made it more tantalizing to teens under that age. And hundreds of thousands of them have apparently had no trouble finding an adult to purchase the game for them.
Mission accomplished. Good work.
Safe to say, when you have a lot of outrage about a game being too graphic, everyone and their dog is going to want to play the game just purely for the hype.
Oh boy, well this is the last thing I wanted.
Remedy Entertainment would later go on to develop Alan Wake, which had a few Easter eggs of their previous game, Max Payne.
I can see them now. My wife and my baby. Honey, I'm home.
In a promotional ad, you can see Sam Lake, who is the man, the myth, and the legend behind the face modelling of Max Payne. In this ad, you have Max Payne and Alan Wake playing Quantum Break back in 2016, yet another game made by Remedy Entertainment, which didn't do so well, unfortunately. Today, I will be going through the story of this game and question if it's a classic, as many beloved fans claim it to be, and mainly talk about what I think of the story, the structure, the tone, setting, as well as its gameplay. The last time I played this game, it was on the PlayStation 2, and the brightness setting was pretty much non-existent. I mostly found it quite difficult to traverse the game. That won't be an issue this time, thank God, due to being on PC. However, I think playing this game as an adult will have an interesting effect, as I will pay much more attention to the story and understand it better, in which I am mostly looking forward to. I won't go too in depth about the gameplay in this video, it's pretty harsh if I do. The game came out back in 2001, so understandably it will be dated and its mechanics and AI pathing won't be as up to date as it is now. Nevertheless, I'll still bring it up, if not because I'm critiquing it or giving it some constructive criticism, or I'll bring it up because it's so broken it's actually quite funny. The game begins by showing you what is assumed to be a glimpse of the ending, with Max on top of a building with the entire police force surrounding him. Once we get started playing, you're told that this is set 3 years after Max decides to transfer to the DEA after his family's murder, in which he's responsible for going undercover to infiltrate the Punchinello crime family, who are the ones behind trafficking the drug known as Valkyr, which is the same drug the murderers of Max's family were using at the time. This is all we know so far. It gives us the incentive that Max is on a revenge path to stop this drug from being sold, to prevent the same thing to happen to another family. A guy called BB, which is a colleague that works in the DEA, tells Max to meet up with a guy called Alex Bladder. I can't be right. Oh, it's Alex Balder, right. Because he's bald. Alright, so the station is crowded by mobsters.
Kiss it goodbye.
years. I always thought of it as a romantic place, a planet of mystery and adventure.
You saved me, man.
These mobsters work for a guy called Jack Lupino, who traffics that Valkyr drug I mentioned earlier. They are using the station as a pass-through to get to the Vosco Bank vault. Once you kill all of them and stop the robbery from happening...
Thanks for the tip. I guess I'll just limp home then.
You meet up with Alex to tell him about Jack Lupino's doing, until he gets shot by a mysterious figure.
This is Lupino's gig?
This is Lupino's doing? Lupino's men? Really?
You sure know how to pick a place? Can you get through?
No, it's locked. We gotta get out of here. If it's Lupino, it's...
So now, the LAPD believe Max is the prime suspect of Alex's murder, and after trying to find Lupino in one of his hotels, you instead find the Finito brothers, who are ready to kill you, as they now know Max is a cop.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
Gotta take your Marble City for you. Lying down. Bring it
Bruh.
Around me are familiar faces, worn out.
The letter on the desk is communication from Lupino's right-hand man, Vinny Gognitti. In order to find Lupino, Gognitti would need to be found first. With the LAPD and the Punchinello crime family after Max, he was now compromised on both ends. You go through the entire hotel dodging bullets from the mobsters to find Rico.
Two mad dog killers, ready to murder each other. They step into the next room, and I'm thinking, now they're gonna do it. What the fuck?!
Oh, Rico, you're so bad.
I am, ain't I?
Once you kill both Rico and Candy, you hear about the result of your actions from Vinny to his boss Lupino. You escape the hotel and go after Vinny, which results into him being wounded and then jumping onto a train, to which results into him getting cornered at the end of the chase, which is when he reveals the location of Lupino. At this point, the game doesn't reveal too much about Lupino. Judging by the mobsters, Vinny and the Finito brothers, you would expect him to be a bit more on the lines of a mobster himself, all about money and power, but what you actually start to realise is he's a lunatic, taking too much of his own product, and has created an inner circle cult. So you eventually enter a boss fight with waves of enemies, but there are plenty of supplies around to keep you going.
Die! Die! Why won't you die? Why won't you die?
Beneath this mask, there is more than flesh. Beneath this mask, there is an idea. And ideas are bulletproof.
Once you kill Jack, a woman named Mona Sachs walks in, the twin sister of Lisa Punchinello, the Don's wife. One thing leads to another, and before you know it, she's drugged you to having crazy, horrible, nightmarish dreams. And that is pretty much the end of part 1. So let's break it down. Alright, so there are moments in what we've been shown so far that do represent that classic noir detective feeling, which is impressive to say the least. They managed to pull it off so effectively in the early 2000s. I do think, however, without the comic book strip cutscenes, it would have struggled, especially with the graphics. I think you wouldn't have been as immersed into the story as much, especially if you're playing it for the first time now, as I feel the graphics are way too dated. However, the style of the cutscenes saves it from feeling like that. There are of course some things that are a little on the nose.
Mona Sachs, Lisa's evil twin.
Hey pal,
You just blowing from Stupid Town?
I guess it's meant to feel that way, in a sense, because it's a crime drama essentially set in the early 2000s, but with a 80s kind of vibe. But still at times it does feel almost a little bit too cheesy, to the point where you cringe a little inside, especially playing it in 2022.
Your rights will be read at your funeral.
Cheese. 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 Cheese.
But sometimes it does work, like when Max and Mona have a drink and put their guns down. It's slightly unexpected, and it's that sort of cool, suave persona that you would get from 80s films. Then all of a sudden she roofies you. And I'm like, what the fuck did I do wrong? There are also bits of the game that don't particularly make that much sense. You're told to meet Alex. From the perspective we are shown as the player, he has intel on what is going on at the station. You literally investigate and take out all the bad guys, stop them from robbing a bank, and then rendezvous with Alex right at the end of the level, to which he has no intel, and basically asks Max all the questions because Max pretty much figures it all out. Then he fucking dies. Maybe there is more to it later on, as I can't remember the plot of the game because it has been over 15 years. But at the moment it doesn't make much sense to me. You could argue though that he was about to tell you some vital information before he got killed, so there is that. We'll have to wait and see. The gameplay in this game isn't as dated as I thought it would be. The guns feel pretty decent and it's fun to go around shooting loads of bad guys that can do a lot of damage towards you even at the lowest difficulty, which you can only play until you complete the game to unlock more difficulty options. You have to think about where you're shooting, as you deal more damage towards the upper torso and head than you would the stomach or lower body. You could argue most games like this back then felt like that, but with this game it's more important to think where to shoot, as it took me a few minutes to work out how much more damage I could do if I picked my shots rather than just hit the target anyway.
Gotcha, bitch!
Now the diving feels a little off. Not as fun or practical as I remember. Most of the time I use it accidentally and it causes me more grief than benefit.
Hello darkness, my old friend.
Most of the time you can't just walk into a room either, you have to be mindful of who's on the other side. The minute you switch off, that's when you'll probably get blasted. I like how the game can help decide which is the best gun you have by hitting G. That way you're not constantly thinking about what gun should I use. And for an indecisive person like myself, that is pretty handy. So far the Uzis are broken. For the most part the gameplay is fun. You have to think on your feet and outside the box, as sometimes playing this game you ask yourself, wait, does this game really want me to jump on that train? I'll die. Then when you do it and you don't die, it feels rewarding, as you've done something that you wouldn't have necessarily done that often in video games, which is thinking outside the box. And when it pays off, it's a different kind of rewarding feeling. Sometimes in order to get through to the next part of the level, you have to change the environment around you, but that can backfire if you're not too careful. Like I said before, this game can feel a little dated at times, and I'm not sure if this is for the original copies on PlayStation 2 or when it got ported to PC, but there are some major glitches in this game that make it almost unplayable, which took me a very long time to get past, and I actually almost gave up.
It's Payne! He's coming down the stairs! Shoot the bastard! It's Payne! He's coming down the stairs! Shoot the bastard! Okay, boss, you got it.
No problem.
Hey! It's Payne! He's coming down the stairs! Shoot the bastard! Okay, boss, you got it.
No problem.
Hey, hold it. What the hell? What the fuck?
Apart from the occasional broken parts of the game, I am actually enjoying myself so far, and the story, thus far, is pretty captivating. After Mona spikes you, you have a nightmare regarding what happened at the beginning of the game.
In the beginning.
You go through what appears to be Max's old house, which changes as you move around and you see the corridors begin to expand to feeling almost like they're endless, whilst hearing the screams of your late family. You reach a point where you must carefully navigate on a bloodline in order to get to the next area. In between each area you pass, you hear the sound of someone talking and in reality are tied up while still dreaming. The dream ends with Michelle begging for her life as Max shoots her.
Max, no, please, Max. Why? I didn't mean to. I'm sorry.
Max wakes up from his induced sleep only to find he is tied to a chair at Frankie the Bat Niagara's mercy. After beating Max bloody, he takes a break and heads to the bar, leaving his baseball bat behind. Max frees himself and only has the bat as his weapon, to which he needs to avoid Frankie's men if he plans on escaping alive. During his escape, he eavesdrops on a conversation between two thugs on the phone regarding what Max assumes is Mona and her current predicament. When you manage to get a weapon, you take out Frankie at the bar and drive off, only to be followed by Vlad, a Russian mobster who offers Max an ultimatum. Punchinello, as we know so far, makes a lot of money selling the drug Valkyr. Vlad disagrees with this and wants Punchinello out of the picture. To kill two birds in one stone, Vlad suggests that Max, quote-unquote armed and dangerous, is the perfect candidate to take out Punchinello's supply line, located on a boat, and to take out Vlad's old associate, Boris Dime, that betrayed him. The reward for Max would be higher quality weapons to use to finally rid New Jersey of Punchinello. Max agrees and clears out the docks and warehouses to reach the boat and kill Boris and collect his new gear. After rendezvousing with Vlad, Max finds a payphone and calls Punchinello directly, asking to make a deal and they should meet. Punchinello agrees to meet at his restaurant in 1 hour. Lo and behold, it was a trap. Max has to quickly get through the building as fast as he can before he is burned alive. Max manages to escape, with Vlad offering him a ride to Punchinello's manor. When Max arrives, he notes there are 3 men known as the Trio, are Punchinello's right-hand men. In order to get to Punchinello, Max would need to take out each one of these targets. Once they're dispersed off, Max runs into Punchinello, who is terrified and starts to tell Max it's not what he thinks, as there is someone more powerful above involved with the government. And before he could finish, 3 suits run in to take out Punchinello, begging for his life.
I told him not to.
While Max manages to kill the suits, he is then surrounded by them outside the room, with a woman with a familiar voice telling him it's game over.
Game over, Max Payne.
Shortly after, he is then injected with the Valkyr drug and forced yet again to have visions that were not true to reality. This leads us to the final part of this game. Okay, so let's talk about the level design in part 2. I have to say, I found myself enjoying this game much more during part 2 than I did in part 1. I started to think about how the design was more interesting, and it kept changing between chapters, enabling the player to adapt, to think on their feet, think outside the box, and to overcome difficult challenges or obstacles. So let's break it down. We are first introduced into one of many dream sequences in the franchise, and if you're like me and have played all the Max Payne games, you know Max has more dreams than the amount of people currently playing Halo Infinite. I thought this chapter was simple within its design, however still maintaining my interest as well as a heavy emphasis on tone and the environment around you. I love the idea of areas changing around you as you move. The feeling of uncomfortableness haunts the player as they hear the screams and cries from Max's deceased family. The infamous red bloodline was not as hard as I remember, but I can tell you right now I don't think I was more focused on the game than during this section. Once you do get the hang of it, it's okay, but Max does handle like the writers of the Netflix Witcher series handled the original source material.
Look how they mess with my boy.
The point of this sequence is to remind the player that Max still suffers deeply about the loss of his family, which of course you would. So it does make sense to add something like this to the game, as it gives the player a stronger connection with Max. Most dreams tend to alternate the truth, or change significant scenarios. For example, Max killing his family. This could be all metaphorical, as he feels deep down in his subconscious that he indirectly let his family die, as he couldn't save them, and in his mind is the equivalent to pulling the trigger. Next chapter, we are awake from our dream. Right off the bat, no pun intended, we have our weapons taken away, which pretty much now is a classic scenario that happens in many games today. Pretty much most RPGs, but back in 2001, this was fresh. I mean, believe it or not, there was a time when escort quests were fresh in game design too, and we all know how I feel about them. When you escape your captivity, you only have a melee weapon, so going in guns blazing is no longer an option. Plus, the bat itself isn't that effective. You see, the range is the issue here. Right, you can sneak past your enemies, or try to take them out one by one. I was more interested in sneaking to the elevator first to see how far I could get without being spotted. Lo and behold, they spot you instantly when the elevator arrives on the ground floor. I managed to take out a few thugs and grab a handgun or two, and at one point I was almost out of ammo, but luckily the game was generous enough to provide more consistently throughout the level, so you don't just run out every 5 minutes. Afterwards, you need to sabotage one of Punchinello's drug supplies on a boat, and this level is my favourite level so far. I thoroughly enjoyed myself playing through this section, as it offered so many more interesting aspects and scenarios that made me feel satisfied, and it made me also feel like a killing machine. Going to warehouse to warehouse, killing Boris's men, avoiding construction crane traps, and overcoming barriers to proceed the game were all these things I found to be satisfying, as I was able to overcome them with less aggravation and stress, as I found myself experiencing in part 1 of the game.
I am the god of hellfire, and I bring you fire. I take you to burn.
This beautiful new weapon is introduced, bolt action sniper rifle, which is extremely OP but balanced with the lack of ammunition. It's introduced at this point of the game to help the player get through to the next level. I was, up until this point, managing okay going through some of the environmental obstacles the game throws at you, but I gotta be honest, I was stumped at this point and I needed help. Once I knew what you had to do, I guess you could say I felt a little stupid, especially since there are posters all around indirectly stating what needs to be done, which again I thought was a good idea to indicate to a player, especially back in 2001 where there was no YouTube. The sniper is one hit, one kill, so I decided to use it only when I'm in a sticky situation. However, it is fantastic for the next part, which involves a small mini-game controlling a crate handler, where you can decide where to go and kill all the snipers in their crow's nests. Originally, I thought this section was going to be me pressing one button once to reach from point A to point B, being shot hundreds of times by enemies on the ground level, with barely any cover. But the game devs were smarter than that and allowed the player to concentrate and pick off their targets one by one, and being very generous again with the ammo. By the time more enemies did come, I had reached point B and was able to easily kill them due to positioning and cover provided. I did this whole section without dying, and in Max Payne for the most part that can be quite difficult to do in some cases, so the feeling was rewarding enough for me to remember this section significantly. Since I again have this sniper rifle, the clearing of the boat was easy enough and I got even more weapons than before right at the end. I went from a walking tank to an F1 fighter jet, but then the game immediately puts you in a situation where you don't use your newly found arsenal but instead need to run through a burning building. This section is an interesting one. We're not shooting our way through hordes of enemies, we're not changing the environment around to benefit us, nor are we sneaking around trying to find a weapon. The player is simply at the level design's mercy and must quickly get through without choosing the wrong path, which could result into either getting stuck within the fire or having the building collapse or explode onto you. This was the point when I realised that part 2 of this game is superior, as it offers so much more variety in its level design, environment and gameplay. It felt almost obvious that one day someone at Remedy Entertainment just sat down and said, let's keep it different and fresh and make sure it's nice and straightforward to give the player variety and more opportunities to adapt. The last part consists of going through a manor, taking out new enemies which dress differently, indicating to the player they are getting closer to their ultimate goal, Punchinello. I like that in games. The further you progress through and towards the end, or what you assume is the end, the enemies begin to evolve as it were, which consists of them obviously being more resilient and having more damage, but they start to appear different to indicate to the player shit's getting serious now, and that's how I felt going through this last section. I thought having to kill 3 main targets was pretty simple, yet effective, as if they weren't included, the player would be able to find and kill Punchinello fairly quickly, which wouldn't make much sense, as this is the crime boss essentially, or so we are told throughout the game, and he would have more subordinates and much more security, which I think was done more or less here. The twist at the end was surprising, and also to be expected all at the same time. Some players, including myself, forgot about that ominous voice on the telephone right at the start of the game.
Listen, someone's broken into my house. Call 911.
Is this the Payne residence?
Yes, someone's broken into my house. They're still here. You have to...
Good. I'm afraid I cannot help you.
Who is this? Hello?
Drop it. Don't move.
Game over, Max Payne.
Hearing it again now with all the suits carrying the top tier weapons of the game surrounding you was a surprise, but I knew I was going to find out who that voice was on that phone, just not when and how. It's a simple and effective way in which they have introduced the character to the player, as it sets the tone that not only is this a gang hustle business, but it's so far past that the government are involved, and according to the game, they have much more power. This is going to be the peak of difficulty of enemies, as well as the final goal. The build up throughout each level, including part 1, has led up to this intervention, which now could end either way. But let's not forget, whether or not it's the end, Max is at the top of the skyscraper which was shown to us at the start. This now more than ever has now left me more interested into finishing this game, and it is thanks not only to the level design, but also the way in which the story is told and the structure of it, to keep the player interested for as long as possible, or at least up to this point, to make it almost certain that I.e. the player will now finish the story of Max Payne. Now, I don't mean to look a gift horse in the mouth. I would in all honesty just like to say this was an awesome part of the game and move on, but I've got to be fair and more accurate with my review. Firstly, at the start, I feel crossing the bloodline would have had more of a narrative effect if Max controlled better. There were times where I couldn't even get on the line to begin with, which obviously resulted in me falling and hearing a loud scream, which became more annoying over time rather than frightening. When using just the bat, I feel it didn't last as long as it could have, giving the player more of a challenge to traverse the thug-crowded area, either by taking out one by one, or having no other option but to try and sneak out the area entirely. That being said, I completely understand why they didn't go for this direction, as having a stealth section with Max Payne 1 mechanics would have been a nightmare. The game almost thinks you do go through that entire section, however, with the bat, as it shows Max holding it in the confrontation cutscene with Freddy. You could, if you wanted to, go through the whole section with the bat. All I am saying is you do get to a point in this chapter where you have a number of guns and ammo pretty quickly from the start, which takes away that intensity and out-of-depth kind of gameplay. I can't really find fault with Chapter 2. I enjoyed it all the way through and found it improved on many things the game lacked up until this point. I guess thugs hiding in the side of small rooms when you walk in and insta-killing you immediately was annoying, but you get that in every level in this game. I guess you could argue this chapter was more or less filler, but even so it's a damn good filler for what it is, and I would play the game again purely on the fact I get to play this level once more. However, I think the point of which when you get upgraded weapons at the end of Chapter 2 on the boat, you should be able to immediately start to use them. However, you are then put into a level where you need to run as fast as you can with the arsenal of weapons that are now obsolete at this point. Chapter 3 was good. I like the variety Part 2 overall offered, do not get me wrong, but to have it straight after getting new guns, exciting the player to use them as soon as possible, only for them to wait until the end of the chapter, wasn't the best timing. Again, this level, although interesting, was most likely filler, as Part 2 overall was much shorter than Part 1, which in my opinion is quality over quantity. Now, having said that, there wasn't much quality in the footage I captured. This is coming from someone who predominantly plays with a controller, and this game doesn't, as far as I'm aware, support joystick, so I had to play with keyboard and mouse. And let me just show you a brief idea of how that went.
What the hell?
finds himself yet again in a drug-induced dream. This dream is similar to the last. You still hear Max's family crying and screaming. Some things change, as each time you walk out of the room, you are brought back in, only to find out that Max is in a novel, or Max is in a video game, showing pictures of the HUD breaking the fourth wall to emphasize the effect of the Valkyr drug. You go through the house again, across another bloodline, trickier than the last, to then Max shooting himself and being accused by himself of the murder of his wife, Michelle. Once awake from the dream, vomiting, Max heads to the steel factory, which has a lot of suspicious activity, to which he snuck in only to find it's got lots of armed men guarding the facility. When taking out each of these men, Max gets deeper into the facility and finds more information about Valkyr and who is responsible. When reaching the lowest level, a self-destruct has been authorized, and after killing the remaining soldiers and suits, Max finds a surviving scientist to give him further access into the facility. This enables Max to uncover the truth. The drug is called Valkyr, which is a reference to the beautiful maidens that bring the dead heroes of Norse mythology to Valhalla, where they spend eternity fighting and feasting. The project was abandoned by the so-called Inner Circle, only to find one member kept the experiment operational. The project was leaked. Coincidentally, Michelle worked for the DA and undercovered for Project Valhalla, to which the woman in charge, named Nicole Horn, doubled the dosage of the Valkyr drug to the test subjects and wanted a test to see the results. That test was a suburban setting launched 3 years ago. The test took place at the Payne residence, killing Michelle and stealing the evidence of the existence of Valhalla. Upon finding this out, Max now, more than ever, had justifiable vengeance at his fingertips, itching to pull the trigger at Horn. When Max escapes, he goes to a diner to caffeinate himself with coffee after coffee, only to be contacted by BB, the character mentioned at the start of the game. Max had come to the conclusion Alex's death and what's happening now had to be an inside job. BB was responsible. BB explains to Max this situation is way bigger than they could possibly imagine, to which the conversation ends abruptly when BB's men show up, taking him away in a car. Max chases after BB, killing all the thugs that stand in his way, and finishes BB once and for all, putting an end to a dirty cop that he was. The payphone rang, and a mysterious voice from earlier asked to meet Max. Turns out it was a member of the so-called Inner Circle. His name is Alfred Woden, the guy that provided the leak to Michelle Payne to incriminate Horn all those years ago. He is now asking Max to finish what he started and kill Nicole Horn. If he does, all charges and warrants for Max will be dropped, and he will be a free man. Before the conversation could go any further, Horn's suits burst in, killing everyone. Luckily, the room was 1 story high, enabling Max to jump out the window unscathed. After clearing out the building of Horn's men, Max manages to escape and reaches a familiar building which we saw at the beginning of the game. When Max reaches an elevator, he bumps into Mona Sachs, who was tasked to kill Max by Horn. She decides not to kill him, resulting into her death as more of Horn's men come round the corner. When Max clears them out, he looks back at the elevator, only to find Mona's body is gone. Max takes out whatever Horn throws at him, from security men, mines in the elevator shaft, and helicopter fire, only to reach the top of the building where Horn is planning to escape via helicopter. When killing the last of Horn's men, Max decides to shoot the cables holding the radio tower stable loose, and to eventually fire at the tower itself to enable its collapse onto the helicopter Horn is in, preventing her escape and ultimately killing her in a blazing fashion. So at the end of the story, Max is escorted by the NYPD from the top of the skyscraper to the back of a squad car. When passing the crowd, he notices Woden is still alive. He almost has like a relief look with a smile on his face, seeing Max alive.
That made 2 of us.
Just before we finish the video, there are a few things I feel need to be said about Max Payne, especially in part 3 of the game regarding performance issues and faulty level design. This section of part 3 was annoyingly frustrating to record and capture footage, therefore affected my enjoyment of the game negatively, which is disappointing as I thought part 2 of the game was a fun and a sufficient build up for the finale. The drug dream sequence is broken.
Fuck it! Where are you, Max?
I'm over here!
In the Bloodline section, Max struggles to get on the line in the first place. Other times he can't even jump. Instead, he does the animation of jumping, but actually decreases his height instead, which then in turn becomes a crouch rather than a jump. The opposite to what I am trying to do. I never died as much as I did in the entire game than I did playing just this part of this level. And the most annoying thing is, they use the same level in part 2 of this game. Sure, it might have different pathing, but it is the same. I feel like reusing both the Bloodline and the house in yet another dream sequence seems lazy or rushed. They're even at the exact same point in their separate parts of the game, causing repetition and a lack of creativity. However, you could argue I'm being too harsh at Remedy for using the same level again, as other beloved franchises have done that in the past, but they got away with it more effectively in my opinion because they flipped it round, turned it on its head and made it work, as it was the same but also different. I also think if something is fun in your game, you can get away with repeating it again.
In Halo 1, there was maybe 30 seconds of fun that happened over and over and over and over again. So if you can get 30 seconds of fun, you can pretty much stretch that out to be an entire game. Encountering a bunch of guys, melee attacking one of them before they were aware, throwing a grenade into a group of other guys, and then cleaning up the stragglers before they could surround you. And so you can have all the great graphics and all the different characters and lots of different weapons with amazing effects, but if you don't nail that 30 seconds, you're not going to have a great game.
Max Payne's strengths are not this type of level design, as it clearly cannot manage it efficiently. It got so bad I had to figure out another way to get to the final jump of this sequence, which was to jump on the side in order to finish the level. This was after I had tried for 35 minutes alone just on the Bloodline section. Here is a rundown of my experience cranked up to 11. When I state the phrase, the other side of the coin of level design, I of course mean the repetitive use of a level, but I also mean the creative ways to progress the game. Earlier in this video, I praised Remedy for their creative thinking, for giving players small barriers to think outside the box to overcome, which will satisfy the player once accomplished. However, when you are only restricted to certain movements, you must make sure your barriers keep that challenging to accomplishable ratio in check, as if it isn't, you might be in a position where you have given your player base a tedious and almost game over barrier to which they cannot pass. I could not for the life of me get onto this broken gangway. It took me many attempts and YouTube playthroughs. To most people, this jump may be fairly easy. I mean, it wasn't a YouTube video I found. Hell, even the comments weren't even talking about this jump being an issue, but a broken bridge jump further on in the level, which I was dreading when I was reading these comments, as I had to do that one next, which is apparently even harder. But it actually turns out it was fairly easy, you just run to the side and cross with ease. But this particular barrier just felt awkward, almost to the point you asked yourself, is this seriously the way forward? it just feels so out of place. But to come from some of these great outside the box thinking, creative and intuitive ideas to change the level in order to progress, to then this was lazy to me and not thought out properly, or a lack of imagination. I think I have come to the conclusion it was rushed towards the end for this great finale build-up, as there are tons of the same design in each section of this level. For example, lasers which blow up. Fantastic, great new feature, but it is used way too much. They're not even a challenge half the time. They're just there to briefly stop you, only for you to shoot them, then they explode, then you move on, etc. The only time they're quite effective is in between the fire. I think the reason being is because part of this game feels like a 3D platform game, to which back in the early 2000s most games still had that arcadey platform rendition, as it was still quite popular, or at least thought to be, among most players at the time. Dead! It's coming! Now, regarding the next level, I didn't really care for BB. I did think that BB was a character that sounded intriguing at the start, but then you kind of forgot about until he is literally just brought back up into thin air again, to then immediately dying in a filler level. Again, this level repeating itself, going down several ramps of a high story car park, constantly chasing BB, felt like it went on a little too long, but it did have something happen each level you go down, creating some level of excitement. I did find killing BB was pretty easy and not as satisfying to me as I had hoped. Don't forget, this is the same guy right at the start of the game that killed Alex. Maybe it is because I forgot about him due to his insignificance to the rest of the story, or it might be the fact that he never got a further comic book strip cutscene after his death. Regardless to why I've mentioned about part 3 of Max Payne, I still had a wicked time playing through this last part. I thought the last level itself was incredibly fun. I felt like a badass most of the time, killing all of the suits and having Horn demoralizing me throughout the level, as well as overhearing her asking her guards why I'm not dead. I'm just one man. It made me feel very threatening towards her, therefore leaving an impression on her, making me, the player, feel I had an effect because of my actions. I thought the levels themselves were stunning, even in 2001, as they are very memorable and unique in their design, and the tone they set hit the mark perfectly, and I think it's because they hit the nail on the head so well with the tone. It is the main reason why most players, including myself, remember these particular levels, or at least parts of them. For example, I haven't played this game since 2008, and I remember the helicopter shooting you in an elevator, and you had to jump out onto another one. It blew my mind back then. I mean, not so much now, that's because I was expecting it. And I only expected it because it was so significant, even though it was 15 years ago. Coming out onto the balcony, the game allows you to look out at New York in the snow, which I thought was such a simple touch they didn't even need to do, but they did it anyway, creating the perfect tone and setting for the player to experience. I think part 3, from the get-go, without a buggy start, is going 100 miles an hour, constant shooting and moving, and plenty of obstacles to get past. And even with its faults, I think it's a fitting and enjoyable finale for Max Payne.
They were all dead. The final gunshot was an exclamation mark to everything that had led to this point. I released my finger from the trigger.
Max Payne was undoubtedly a game that was ahead of its time, but does it hold up today? Yes. And no. There are plenty of bugs and crashes that frustrated me to the point several times where I wanted to stop and move on with another video, and if it wasn't for the purpose of a review, I probably would have. But in saying that, I had a lot of fun playing through this game regardless of these bugs, due to its interesting narrative, satisfying gameplay, creative level design, and of course, the main one, nostalgia. I would recommend this game to anyone who is thinking of playing it, and I suggest for those of you who have played it in the past and haven't come back to it in a while, give it another try and see whether or not you agree with some of my views. Or maybe there are bits you found slightly different, or you had a completely different experience altogether. Either way, do not hesitate to comment down below on what you thought of Max Payne. So, here we are. I would like to thank you all for watching this video. This was my review of Max Payne, to which he truly was a man with nothing to lose. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos. I will return to the Max Payne franchise for another review, but until then, there'll be other videos throughout. This has been The Gamer Life. Until the next time, bye bye.